In 1928, Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin, the world's first true antibiotic, which changed medicine forever. Now, almost 100 years after this groundbreaking discovery, scientists have turned to artificial intelligence to help humanity fight disease in the new era of bacterial resistance to antibiotics. And the result of their research is nothing short of astonishing. If, like me, you're in dire need of some fresh and uplifting news, you have come to the right place. From China amping up their renewable energy efforts to teenagers using CPR training to save their friend's life, get ready to relieve some stress and be inspired. My name's Regis. Join us as we take a look at the most interesting good news stories from all around the world. The best way to start this edition of Good News is with proof that environmental activism really works. Back in episode 21, we talked about Greece becoming the first European country to ban bottom trawling from marine protected areas. Now, less than 2 months after that historic announcement, Sweden has decided to take it a step further. In case you missed that previous episode, you might be wondering why bottom trawling is so bad. Imagine a ship dragging a huge net across the bottom of the sea, tearing up everything in its wake. Some describe it as rototilling the seabed, as it destroys seabed habitats and disrupts the balance of marine life. With 3/4 of the world's fisheries already overfished, NGOs have been fighting to ban bottom trawling for years now, and now their work is finally starting to bear fruit. In 2023, the European Commission called on its member states to phase out this type of fishing in marine protected areas by 2030. Following in Greece's footsteps, the Swedish government decided to take the initiative even further. You see, marine protected areas only make up 15% of all Swedish territorial waters. So Sweden decided to take it up a notch and ban bottom trawling in all Swedish waters. Since the country is one of the major fishing powers in Europe, this decision marks a giant step forward towards phasing out bottom trawling on a global scale. Hopefully, other countries will follow suit, and we'll soon have our oceans restored to their former glory. And speaking of glory, the medical community had a reason to celebrate recently when a new cancer drug passed clinical trials with flying colors. The goal of the trial was to test a new drug for a very challenging disease, lung cancer. Statistics tell us that this is the most vicious and deadly type of cancer, as it accounts for around 1.8 million deaths each year. Survival rates are particularly poor when it comes to the advanced stages, where the tumor has already spread. The thing that makes fighting lung cancer so incredibly challenging is the lack of early symptoms. Once patients start noticing symptoms like shortness of breath, coughing, and chest pain, the disease is already in an advanced stage. Then there's also the issue of treatment, because until recently it just wasn't very effective. Luckily, there's a new drug in town called lorlatinib, which passed its clinical trial with flying colors. According to the study, it was more effective against lung cancer than any other treatment in medical history. The trial had a control group that received the standard drug called crizotinib. Only 8% of the control patients responded positively to the treatment. However, out of 149 patients who received lorlatinib, 5 years later, 60% of them were still alive and without any progression of the cancer. The results are honestly amazing and give new hope to patients and their families all around the world. Now let's hop over to Suriname and see how a recent court decision protects the rights of indigenous communities. It's the smallest and least populated country in South America, but also the greenest, with around 93% of its land surface covered by native forests. Shockingly, the country's government planned to destroy over 500,000 hectares of rainforest, disturbing the livelihood of the indigenous population. After this news broke, activists sprung into action, and in a surprising turn of events, a Suriname court decided to support the good guys. It all started last year with a report by an environmental science and conservation news platform known as MegaBuilds. Their investigation revealed that the Suriname government planned to destroy a section of the country's primary forest, roughly the size of Puerto Rico, and use it for agriculture. The plan also proposed settling Mennonite families in the area. The only problem with this is that they've been known for participating in unregulated deforestation, establishing over 200 agricultural colonies all over South America. This prompted a group of 12 indigenous and marooned groups to file a lawsuit in an attempt to halt the plans. After considering their arguments, the court ruled that the government doesn't have the right to grant land without free, prior, and informed consent. This ruling has now set a historic precedent because Suriname is the only South American country that usually doesn't legally recognize ancestral territory for indigenous people. The battle's not over yet, but it's certainly a huge step in the right direction. But let's leave the lush rainforests of Suriname and go to New Jersey. This is the incredible story of how two teenagers became local heroes for saving a friend's life. It all happened in the blink of an eye. During a routine exercise on the treadmill, 14-year-old JJ unexpectedly collapsed to the floor. His heart had stopped. Luckily, his quick-thinking friends knew just what to do. You see, JJ was suffering from a genetic heart disorder called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. It's a condition that makes it hard for the heart to pump blood throughout the body. For example, JJ's heart pumps around 70% of what it normally should. So naturally, during physical exercise, his heart struggles to supply all the organs in his body with enough oxygen, and that can result in a sudden cardiac arrest. JJ's family made sure all his coaches and teammates were aware of his condition and that they had proper CPR training. So, what should you do if you ever find yourself in a similar situation? First and foremost, you should always call 911. Then, check for a pulse by firmly pressing 2 fingers on the side of the patient's neck. If the patient's heart has stopped, time is of the essence. Put the bottom of your palm at the center of the patient's chest and the other hand on top of it. Start pumping hard around 2 times per second. Some experts suggest singing "Stayin' Alive" by the Bee Gees to keep in rhythm. The moment JJ fell down, his 2 friends, 14-year-old Trevor Hodgins and 18-year-old Giovanni Scafidi, sprung into action. We couldn't confirm if they were singing "Stayin' Alive" as they were performing CPR, but they nevertheless did a good job and managed to save their friend's life. JJ was able to continue his life normally, and he recently graduated from high school, all thanks to his friends. Heroes come in various shapes and sizes. Some of them sit quietly behind a desk, coming up with new ways to make our planet clean and healthy for all living beings. Recently, one such team of researchers discovered a new ally in the fight against pollution. It's called Biochar. They came to the idea while analyzing one of the world's biggest polluters, agriculture. Most people aren't aware that after all the fields get harvested, a lot of waste gets left behind in the form of crop residue. Traditionally, all the husks, roots, and leaves are either burned or left to rot, both of which release greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. However, the researchers also knew that plants take CO2 out of the air and store it in their tissue. So if that tissue could be turned into biochar, that would effectively sequester CO2 from the atmosphere and kind of lock it away. So how does it work? Using a process called pyrolysis, which burns organic material with high heat and limited oxygen, plant residue turns into biochar. It's kind of similar to charcoal. To make things even better, biochar can also be used as a soil additive. So not only does this process sequester CO2, it also makes our land more fertile. The study, published in the journal GCB Bioenergy, claims that this process could effectively lock away 550 million metric tons of carbon into the soil each year. That's more than the total CO2 emissions of Indonesia. Researchers further claim that, depending on local climate and other factors, as much as 71% of that carbon would still be locked in the soil even 100 years later, which is honestly incredible. With potential government subsidies supporting the agenda, we'll hopefully see this process being used worldwide. By the way, if you want to learn more about turning crop residue into biochar, you can check out our sources in the description down below this video. Earlier, we talked about how Greece and Sweden made important steps to save our planet. But they're not the only countries to do so. Recently, China has unveiled the biggest solar farm in the world. We've all seen images of Beijing getting enveloped in a cloud of hazardous smog. That's partly because, until recently, most of China's electricity came from burning fossil fuels. In addition to using huge amounts of charcoal, this ascending world power was also the second largest consumer of oil. In 2023 alone, China was burning over 16 million barrels of oil per day. Since the country produces only around 4 million barrels per day, the rest had to be imported, and it came at a hefty price. The turning point happened during the recent pandemic. During the lockdowns, China experienced several major power shortages caused by a lack of available coal. At the same time, droughts diminished the capacity of hydro plants, which exacerbated the issue. So China decided to invest in renewable energy, and solar and wind farms started popping up all over the country. And here comes the recent good news. On June 3rd, they announced that the world's largest solar plant had been connected to the grid in northwest Xinjiang. The 3.5 gigawatt solar plant near Urumqi will be able to produce over 6 billion kilowatt hours of electricity every year. That's enough energy to power the entire country of Papua New Guinea. As great as that sounds, it's just one part of China's MegaBuilds project, aimed at installing a total of 455 gigawatts of wind and solar plants across the Xinjiang region. According to experts, in 2024, renewable energy is going to overtake coal in China's electricity production for the first time in their history. Hopefully, other countries will do the same, and burning fossil fuels for energy will become a thing of the past. Now, as we often do on Good News, we have saved the best for last. But before we get there, if you like inspiring and uplifting stories, feel free to like this video and subscribe to Good News. We really appreciate the support you guys are giving to the channel right now. It is fantastic. Since we touched upon modern technology and the way it's changing our world, we have to address one of the most controversial technologies recently, AI. As the entire world seems to be buzzing about artificial intelligence, many news outlets focus on its negative aspects. Here's an example of how researchers use AI to help humanity fight against harmful microbes. Experts say that there are roughly 5 million trillion bacteria in the world. Yeah, that's an actual number. And even though only 1% of those microbes can cause disease in humans, that's still a lot of millions. And to make things worse, they're incredibly resilient. As soon as humans started using antibiotics on a large scale, these microbes were developing ways to fight back. Today, antibiotic resistance is one of the biggest global threats to human health. According to a 2022 study, in 2019, 1.27 million people died due to drug-resistant infections. Some estimates say that by 2050, that number will cross 10 million. Basically, the bacteria learned how to change its genetic structure and become resistant to our medicine. This usually happens gradually over time, but humans manage to accelerate the process by misusing and even overusing antibiotics. Even worse, no new classes of antibiotics have been developed in decades, so obviously something needs to be done, and fast. The problem is that discovering a new antibiotic usually takes at least 10 to 15 years. But here comes the good news. To speed things up, an international team of scientists decided to use AI. The algorithm they created helped them scan the chemical structure of tens of thousands of microorganisms, looking for peptides that have antimicrobial properties. Peptides are molecules normally found in all living things, and some of these molecules can actually fight harmful microbes. Using machine learning, researchers were able to identify 863,498 potential antimicrobial peptides. And best of all, the algorithm was able to do this much faster than humans ever could. Just to be clear, these are only potential antibiotics, and further studies and tests are definitely required here. But this was still a groundbreaking achievement and one of the greatest antibiotic discoveries to this very day. It gives humans new hope and a new tool in the battle against harmful bacteria. So, what do you think about using AI to discover new medicine? Do you believe that using it as a tool will allow us to cure more diseases in the future? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. And if you like this video, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode, which will be coming your way very soon.